This is a joint SEAC and REL Midwest collaboration. We cannot wait to hear from our co-presenters today and from all of you as to how you are connecting with students every day. Next slide, please. I'm Anushka Shirali, and I'm serving as the Deputy Director for the Center. Other key members on this project include Brian Cohane, our Project Officer, Dr. Tracy Scott, and Liz Lembo from the Department of Education, and Sarah Frizzell, my co-project director at AIR. We're also pleased to partner with colleagues from REL Midwest today. They will be discussing their recently released Making Equitable Schools Audit and how it has been used in schools in Akron, Ohio. Next slide, please. Our session objectives include sharing how a student's sense of belonging and connectedness is related to attendance patterns. We will also cover a few strategies that schools can implement to measure student belongingness and connectedness to make database decisions to make strategic improvements in these areas. And we will conclude the webinar with a presentation from our REL partners, REL Midwest to be specific, on their newly published tool, the Making Equitable Schools Audit, and how the tool can be used to promote student belonging and connectedness. Next slide, please. On the agenda today are some housekeeping items that we've quickly gone through. Following that will be a presentation on student belonging and connectedness, and then moving on to hearing a little bit about the Making Equitable Schools Audit, and then quite a bit of time for discussions, questions, wrap up, and next steps. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Sarah to kick us off. Sarah?
Thank you so much, Anushka. Let's go ahead and switch to the next slide. I really am appreciative of everybody showing up today. We hope this is an engaging conversation, but before we really get into what school connectedness is and what we mean by this and the definitions and research, I want everybody just to take a moment to reflect on your schooling experience. Maybe it's a school that you went to, one that you've been to recently, or one that you've read about. But thinking about that schooling experience, what does a school with a strong culture of student connectedness look like, feel like, sound like? And if you could drop that in the chat, that would be great. And just priming the pump a little bit for what does that school connectedness feel like? Warm, loving, communication, engaging, democratic. I love all of these. Supportive, being included, involved, something for everyone, grading students by name, asking questions. These are great. These are really great descriptions. Thank you. Taniko, can you move us to the next slide? You can keep those coming if you want. Thank you. So the research from the CDC has actually identified school connectedness as an important protective factor for students now and as they transition into adulthood. School connectedness, as defined by the CDC, is when students feel that the adults and the peers in their building really care about their learning, but also about them as individuals. This includes a sense of being cared for, being supported, and belonging at school. And while ultimately school connectedness strategies have to occur at the school building, you as an SEA or LEA can really help promote some of the things that you're learning today as strategies and provide materials and resources and guidance to your districts and schools in their implementation process. Next slide. So why is school connectedness so important? It sounds nice, it feels good, right? But is there any real connection here? Research from the CDC has shown that students who do feel connected to school are much more likely to have positive attendance, educational, behavioral, and health outcomes, both now and into their adulthood. When youth feel connected to their school, they're also a lot less likely to experience poor mental health, sexual health risks, substance abuse, and engage in violent behavior. A sense of being cared for, supported, and belonging at school has also been shown to combat feelings of loneliness, sadness, and hopelessness, all of which we know our students are struggling with a lot more often since the pandemic, and all of which have an impact on students' attendance behaviors. Moreover, these types of positive impacts continue to hold true for students experiencing trauma. So boiled down, when students feel like they belong in school and are meaningfully connected to their peers and the other adults in the building, school can become a safe place where they want to be and they want to show up. Next slide. So that's all great, but what does that actually have to do with attendance, right? Well, many schools have suspension policies for students who accumulate tardies and absences. Actually, 500,000 suspensions over the last 5 years for attendance-related violations have occurred, according to a new study published in May by the Hettinger Report. But limited research exists on whether suspensions are actually effective when it comes down to discouraging absenteeism. So rather than focus on suspensions, there was a group of 49 schools that were a part of the GRAD partnership that switched their focus from more punitive measures to really double down on fostering positive relationships, student agency, student belonging, and really using data to take strategic actions. They used these core principles to reduce chronic absenteeism by over 5 percentage points in just 1 year. That's huge. We haven't seen that kind of impact by any attendance strategy in a really long time, even pre-pandemic. So student connectedness really comes down to this being fundamental and the connective tissue, the holistic student success systems. Next slide. And while ultimately student connectedness strategies have to occur at the building level, you as the SEA or LEA can really promote these research-based strategies and provide materials and guidance to help your districts and schools in their implementation process. The strategies that we're about to present are based on research from the CDC and the GRAD partnership, but they're by no means an exhaustive list. They're just 3 things that we picked out that we feel like might be really useful as you're starting the school year, something that's easy, hopefully low cost, that you can go ahead and implement as your school year starts. The California Safe and Supportive Schools has published a What Works brief that Anusha's going to put in the chat on the research behind school connectedness. And this provides some additional specific strategies that can be considered by states and districts. Thank you, Anushka. So let's think. Extracurricular activities have always been cited by students as one of the motivating factors for attending school. Even though these activities may not directly tie into academics, the CDC has found that they can help promote connectedness between their peers, foster a sense of accomplishment, and help build relationships with adults that supervise the activities. You can encourage your districts and schools to really stop and think about what activities do we provide that students can participate in. Most schools at least have a few sports that students can be involved in, but not every student who wants to participate may have the resources. To encourage inclusive opportunities, start to think about and plan supports for students who may not have the ability to participate. Some of these barriers might be transportation to practices and events, could be financial costs for uniforms and equipment, or health clinics for required physicals. As a state or a district, really thinking regionally can help spread the cost of this more regionally and provide all schools some of these benefits. So thinking about cost sharing and partnering with local organizations across a district or a region, it can really help lower that financial burden on individual schools for these types of supports. Additionally, not all students are interested in sports. I'm sure if we did a poll across the audience today, not all of you participated in sports, but had other activities that really were meaningful and helped you show up to school. A lot of times extracurricular activities, as you know, are chosen by the adults in the building first, and then students have to choose. But one thing that we can do is really flip that. I was facilitating some focus groups in a middle school in Washington State. And I was working with students who were very disengaged, had low participation rates, low attendance. And one of the things that the educators learned throughout these conversations was that the opportunities that they were providing within the school really did not match the interest of these students. So the takeaway for them was that they flipped it actually and started surveying students in their beginning advisory period at the very beginning of the year to see what sports or what opportunities the students were interested in. They created a list on some of the top ones, and then they gave it to the teachers to see if the teachers would be willing to facilitate and lead some of those opportunities. That's a very low cost option that you can implement as soon as you start in school. But just like for sports, we also need to think through some of those common barriers for student participation. Think about opportunities within the school day for students to participate. Is there an advisory period that could be used? Are there lunchtime periods that might be able to be used to offer some of these other opportunities? Think about your local community. Are there local businesses or community organizations that could donate any needed supplies? Also thinking about your strategic budgeting opportunities. Are there grants or partnerships that could be leveraged to provide more opportunities for students? Overall, SEAs and LEAs can also look for exemplars that you're seeing at the beginning of the school year or throughout the school year and really highlight that for the other districts and schools in your area. That's a really great way to share good practices that are happening in your locality. Next slide. Another strategy for helping students feel more connected to school is to build a mentorship program. Mentorship programs can vary from highly structured activities to informal opportunities for connection. As an SEA or an LEA, you can encourage your districts and schools to start their own mentorship programs and bring awareness of the different types of mentorship programs. I think one of the most common mentorship programs that we think about is programs that focus on adult to student relationships. These sometimes are one-to-one pairings with students or one adult with a group of students, where the adult is then designated to monitor the student progress and wellness. And they're also available to the students to be able to talk if they have questions. Sometimes it can be really hard to find, especially if we're trying to match students with adults one-to-one. Sometimes it's hard to find enough adults in the building. And so in those kind of cases, if that rings true for your location or your region, I encourage you to also think about engaging all of the adults in the building. There might be bus drivers, food preparation staff, custodial staff, school volunteers who already have built-in relationships with students. And so by being able to use some of these other folks, we can broaden that base and allow us to have more access to adults who can be caring mentors and listening to students. Another type of mentorship program is near-peer mentorships. So mentorship programs that focus on near-peer relationships can also help foster a sense of belonging and connectedness for students. Near-peer mentorship programs typically pair older students with younger students. So if you're thinking about this, this could be seniors with freshmen, or a high school student with a middle school student, or middle school students. I've seen it also in like elementary school, where you've got like the fifth and sixth graders doing a reading program with some of the younger kids. These programs can help older students feel a sense of responsibility where they can share their experience, and with younger students gives them a little bit of responsibility. And for the younger students, it can also provide them with someone near their age that they can ask questions to and advice from. Regardless of the type of mentorship program, though, you really need to think about making a plan for safe and secure relationship building. Safety is of utmost importance. Mentoring.org provides some comprehensive research-based ideas for creating almost any type of mentorship program. Above all, though, you need to make sure that there's a safe location for meeting that is public or monitored frequently so that we're not setting up the possibility for poor outcomes, and also that there's open channels to report any type of abuse. You may also find the New York City's Success Mentors model helpful, and Anushka's already put that one in the chat. Thank you. It's a really good resource. Also, the National Mentoring Resource Center can be a good resource. They're a program from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and it's managed by an organization called Mentor. So if you just search mentor.org, we've also got that one in the chat, I believe. They are ones that provide no-cost training and technical assistance for mentoring programs to help the mentoring programs meet quality standards and implement evidence-based and best practices for mentoring. They're also a really great resource because they can provide resources to support mentoring programs like training and supplies and things like that for free. So consider sharing some of these resources with your districts or schools that might be interested in starting their own structured mentoring program. Thank you. Next slide. The final strategy that we're going to cover at the beginning of this webinar is around classroom management. The CDC has identified 6 research-based practices for classroom management that promote school connectedness. As an SEA or an LEA, you can share these resources with your districts or schools and help provide resources and or guidance around them. By talking to your districts or schools, again, you can do this thing where you're looking across your region and find really great exemplars that you can then help share amongst your region. So I'm going to go through these 6 pretty quickly, but the first one that's on the slide is the teacher caring and support. Students who believe that their teachers build strong, positive relationships with them, like they feel that, and they also feel that their students or that their teachers care about them and respect their feelings, report higher levels of connectedness to their schools and to their peers. Teacher caring and support has also been associated with improved student engagement in math and reading. So you're getting a double bonus there, right? Peer connection and support is the next one. And students who report feeling connected to, supported by, and respected by their peers demonstrate higher levels of engagement in school. And they also report feeling more connected to their school as well. Student autonomy and empowerment. When students feel that their teachers are open to their ideas and allow them to make choices regarding their learning and what schoolwork they're doing, they tend to be more engaged in school, less disruptive in class, and also report feeling a stronger sense of belonging and connectedness. There's opportunities within every classroom to just kind of poll the students and see where can we make that relevance, right? Where can we take our curriculum and really make it relevant to the students' lived experiences? Next one is management of classroom social dynamics. And this one can be tricky, but when teachers take active steps to manage the social dynamics and promote positive interactions and friendships in class, the students again are reporting a lot more feelings of connectedness to their peers. They also have higher sense of school bonding and a sense of belonging at school. The fifth one is teacher expectations paired with rigorous curriculum. Because when students believe that their teachers have high expectations for them, they're also likely to be more engaged in school and report feeling like they belong at school. For example, students who have a stronger sense of school belonging and higher levels of engagement in school, they believe their teachers think that they can do well in it and have the ability to perform to their potential. For example, they would say, rate strongly that my teacher believes that I can do well in class. There's additional research from the University of Pittsburgh and Harvard University that also shows that pairing rigorous curriculum with high teacher expectations increases the quality of students' participation in class discussion. So really having both really helps promote that school connectedness. Rigorous curriculum by itself is important, but also having those teacher expectations that help build the confidence of the student is important. And then finally, behavior management. When teachers provide clear and consistent expectations for behavior in the classroom, and then they take actions to promote positive pro-social behaviors, students report a much stronger sense of connectedness to the school and again, also to their peers. For more details on all of these practices and to get really specific examples, we encourage you to visit the CDC website on classroom management approaches to support school connectedness. And Anishka has just put that into the link, into the chat. Thank you. All right, next slide. Okay, hopefully these three big bucket ideas have given you something to think about as the school is starting, some ideas that you might be able to put in place at the beginning of the school year. But how will a district or school really know if their programs are having the desired impact that they want? Even though school connectedness can feel like a very abstract, hard to measure construct, we know that educators that have been implementing these strategies are using quantifiable data to assess their efforts school-wide and engage in this continuous improvement process throughout the school year. So let's talk about some of those ways that we can measure school connectedness. The first one is go to the source. So thinking about encouraging districts and schools to plan time to check in with students and provide opportunities for students to talk with leaders of the initiatives to provide feedback. They're going to know whether things are actually making them feel more connected and like they belong in school. You can also involve students in the process of improvement because that can be a powerful learning opportunity for both the students and the educators in the building. And it supports student connectedness as well. According to the CDC, students reported feeling much more connected to their school and peers when they felt that students were given the chance to help make some of those decisions and had a say in how things work. Another strategy could be to use climate or social-emotional learning surveys. They can be a great resource for gauging whether students feel like they belong in school and are connected to their peers and teachers. Several companies offer these types of surveys, but if you don't have an out-of-the-box survey instrument that you've already invested in, you can still do these kind of surveys yourself and create them on your own. Some tips, whether you're using an out-of-the-box survey program or creating your own. Shannon Finice is an educator who provided a few tips to think about as you're implementing the surveys. First, always make sure that you're explaining the purpose of the survey. That way students know why they're being asked for their voice and what it's going to be used for. Next, don't take feedback personally. Just use it as a learning opportunity. When we are actually asking students and families how they're feeling about things, we're not always going to get exactly fuzzy feelings, right? But that's an opportunity for growth. Next, share the results with the students and ask them for help with the solutions. So again, every time you give a survey, the students or families or whoever you're engaging with these surveys, they should know what the results are. And that can help them be more participatory in the future. And they can also help out with the solution. Next, model a growth mindset for students by identifying and owning like some areas for growth. That helps model that for them and can help promote that within the school. Next, make sure to follow through. If we're saying that we're going to make a change within the school year, or we know that the student leadership group or family leadership group has identified a few areas for growth, we need to acknowledge that and show how we're making progress to that. And so finally, along with that, making sure to celebrate the successes as the growth occurs can really be a continuous cycle of improvement. It can help really bolster the participation of the students and the families in these kind of surveys, because it makes them feel like their voice is actually being heard and that changes are happening based on what their experiences are. The final measure that we're going to talk about is spreadsheets. And spreadsheets, everybody might be rolling their eyes, but we can also use spreadsheets to track connectedness measures. Researchers from the Grad Partnership really highlighted this strategy as a tangible, low-cost option for any district or school to use to measure school connectedness. And Anushka's just put that in the chat. Thank you, Anushka. This is an example from a school in Fort Lauderdale High School outside of Meridian, Mississippi, where they created a Google spreadsheet and sent it around to all the staff to see which students were connected to which activities. Upon learning that 40% of their students were not involved in any activities outside of their academic work, they then used that data to help find a place for each of the students identified as unconnected. Using their tracking spreadsheet, they were able to quickly and easily see when students were engaged in an activity and talk to the students who weren't engaged in anything. From this information, they then started to find new opportunities for students to engage in school beyond academics. And now, after 1 year of participation in doing this, they have now 88% of their students connected to something beyond the classroom. And the adults in the building are continuing to find new involvement areas. As an added resource, you may find the SEAC Youth Engagement Tool and the SEAC Family Engagement Tool helpful to frame and plan your engagement strategies this coming year. I'm now going to turn this over to our partners at Rel Midwest to discuss how their recently released Making Equitable Schools Audit tool has been used to help build school connectedness and belonging. Jessie?
Hi, everybody. Excited to join this expert group on screen and also to at least sort of meet those of you in the participant list here. My name is Jessie Kerr-Vanderslice. We can actually go to the next slide. I'm the partnership lead for the Making Equitable Schools Audit. And I'm joined here by my illustrious colleague and district partner, Frank. Frank, you wanted to say hi?
Hello, everybody.
So Frank is joining me as one of the implementation leads from one of our school partners. And so we'll speak a little bit more about his experience at North High School later on in this presentation. But what we're hoping to do today as part of this session is share a little bit about our intervention called the Making Equitable Schools Audit. And I think I'm already hearing tons of connections to all of these great resources that have been shared. So hopefully this will be a nice example of how some of this work might come out of the research space and go down into the implementation space. So maybe some examples for how you all could be thinking about doing this work in your own districts and schools. We can go to the next slide. So we know that audit is in our name, but and we do an equity audit as part of this process, but it's just one little piece of this overall intervention. So MESA is our short name for it, but MESA is an intervention that we at the Rel Midwest have designed to work in high schools, although I think a lot of these approaches really are relevant for elementary through maybe even later into college. So the overall process, even if you're not in high schools, I hope the process still feels relevant. And so we're really focused on helping schools think about how they can increase, we talk a lot about student belonging, but it's the same concept as student connectedness. We're thinking about how to make sure that more young people are feeling engaged, like they belong, like they have a space, and we're really coming at it through a lens of equity. We want to make sure every student in the building has an equal access to a high level of student belonging. And to date, we've designed the intervention and implemented it in collaboration with 3 high schools in Akron, Ohio. This year, we're now going into 3 additional high schools. So we continue to learn and research the initiative as we go. And like I said, while audit's in our name, we're really a full year intervention. And so you can see our cute little train map here on the screen. We start with 2 onboarding sessions where we work with district and school administrators like Frank to make sure they know what is about to happen, that they have time to recruit the right people to be working with us over the course of the year. We then move into pre-audit coaching sessions where we're working with a diverse group of school staff. I think Sarah spoke about this earlier in the presentation, thinking about everybody in the building, your school security officer, your guidance counselors, your social workers, your bus drivers, who all needs to be here, who has some insights into how young people belong at school. So that's really setting folks up to engage in this data review process. The green line, we go in for a full day in-person equity audit where we're working with school leaders, teachers. We're then also inviting other non-instructional staff, students, who really always the highlight of the day, family members, and any community partners. I haven't heard tons of that yet, but I have to say I'm from an after school and community background. So having those folks in the room as well has been really essential. And those folks work together to make meaning out of data, look at the information I'm going to show you in a minute, all the types of information we're looking at together. But they're really analyzing information that will help them understand more who exactly at the school is feeling certain ways, who's able to succeed, who has access to high quality opportunities, who has access to high quality relationships, and who doesn't, and how can we think about why. And so then in those post-audit coaching sessions, that's really the stuff we're starting to dig into, is the root cause understanding of what's going on, what did we learn from our data analyses, and how can the school put in some strategies in place to start filling in some of those gaps. And so by the end of the year, we've really just started the planning process. So Frank will speak to that a little bit more. By the end of the year, they have a plan. By the end of the year, they've responded to their data, they've thought about what they want to do, and they've put some strategies in place that really begin to happen after we leave, unfortunately. But ideally that should be setting them up for success and implementation as they go into the next school year. We can go to the next slide. So the Making Equitable Schools Audit is an initiative of the Regional Education Laboratory Midwest program. And if you haven't had a chance to work with one of the RELs before, I hope you do get a chance to do that. If you're in the Midwest, please reach out to me. My information is going to appear on the end of this slide. We'd love to partner with you. But essentially, the RELs partner with educators and policy makers around the country. Specifically, the REL Midwest in this current cycle, we're really focused on equity-related projects. So ours is in keeping. And we're seeking to address priorities related to the needs and outcomes of students who are farthest from opportunity. So that's really our focus. And we're coming at it from a research to practice lens, where we're trying to bring in the best of what we know around research and put it into practice with folks who are in schools and districts around the country. We can go to the next slide. And thanks for putting the infographic in there. So I think we're hopefully building on some of the good stuff you've already heard today, but you've been hearing this throughout the presentation. We are pretty sure, if we know anything for sure, we're pretty sure that students with a strong sense of belonging, they're more likely to be engaged in school, and you can't perform academically, you can't build relationships, you can't go on to next step successes if you're not there. So they're, getting engaged, building those relationships, performing, all of those things. Young people need to feel that sense of connectedness, that sense of belonging. We also know that school factors like discipline policies, access to high quality learning opportunities, and that understanding of whether it feels safe really impacts young people's sense of belonging, and that students of color and students receiving special education services feel less safe and supported at school a lot of the time. They're more likely to experience discipline, especially those exclusionary discipline outcomes like suspensions and expulsions, and overall across the country report being less engaged in school. And so that's really where we're trying to come at this conversation, figuring out in partnership with schools, in partnership with teachers and principals, identifying, understanding, and addressing those inequities and some of those school factors in order to then increase student belonging overall. So that's really our foundation. That's where we're coming from. We can go to the next slide. So in the equity audit itself, I think there's many things you could look at, but as part of the MESA approach, we are analyzing, displaying visually, and looking at data that comes from some specific kind of buckets of what all the school is collecting. We do our best to make sure that we're working within data sets that schools already have regular access to and are already having conversations about. We don't want to be bringing in something here that is going to be brand new or requires schools to pay a whole lot of money to understand. These are data points that schools are already thinking a lot about. And so we're looking at data together around young people's engagement, learning, and attainment. And so that's really about how they're benefiting from instruction. It's also about their attendance. It's about their grades, some of those test scores as well. We're also looking at their access to high quality instruction and curriculum. And so this is some of those pipelines around who gets access to honors, who's in AP, who are getting additional learning supports, who are getting designated for IEPs or other additional supports, and some of those additional opportunities, who is getting engaged in sports or theater or after school opportunities. And then finally, we're looking at some of those safe and supportive school environment pieces. So that's around their safe and emotionally supportive learning environments. We're looking at student surveys, climate surveys, and those discipline data. We can go to the next slide. And so, like I said, the final result of this, this intervention is that we create a plan with our school partners. And we've only worked with 3 schools so far, but we're already starting to see some themes in the strategies people are putting in place. And so folks in our schools are really beginning to drill down into building out additional professional learning opportunities for staff. And so some examples you'll see on the right. I'll let you read this slide. I'm not going to read everything, but for example, implicit bias training. We're looking at investments in building better and deeper teacher and student classroom relationships. So things like improving de-escalation strategies. We're also looking at systems level policies and policy changes. So things like how teachers are recommending students for honors and who. We're also talking a lot about educator mindsets, and this is the really tricky stuff because we're grown-ups and it's hard to change what we believe, but we're having conversations about how we continue to challenge each other around what discipline is and what it means and who it's for, about who can achieve, about student abilities. And then we're also looking at strategies around family and community engagement and student-centered supports. So these are by no means an exhaustive list of every strategy people put in place, but these are some of the areas that we're starting to really see traction and priorities being set in our school partners. We can go to the next slide. So I'm going to hand it over at this point to Frank Collane from now East High School, but formerly North High School. And I think he really represents a lot of the best qualities here. He's our school lead and then also a former coach. So he really deeply understands about all these relational pieces we're talking about today. So take it away, Frank.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to try to put this in like a practical sense for everybody because I don't know how many administrators we have here, but you look, your day is very busy. So everything we talked about within our groups and going through this process, it's what can we really do and get done. It's easy to come up with the data, but to have that action plan and make sure you follow through is very important. So just to let you know a little bit about North High School, when I was there last year, I'm a retired principal. I was the interim principal there last year. I went into North. It's probably the most diverse high school in the state of Ohio. We have a high English language learner population, so we do have some different challenges there with our students, and we're also an urban school district. So, but just to start off, we had 3 counselors and 6 teachers that I was able to recruit. I tried to recruit people that weren't our standard leaders around our school improvement, other areas. I tried to bring some new people into the fold because the more people we can get on board, that's going to help us make a difference as far as the rollout and making sure that we are following through on all of our ideas. So we start off with counselors, teachers, and of course our partners from Mesa, and we start talking about data and kind of calibrating on how to look at that data. Eventually we got to the point where we added on 4 students, a parent, a community member, as we did the actual audit and really dug into that data that we were able to get from our district. As you can see on this slide, even though we have high chronic absenteeism rates and they kind of continue to grow, we do have a high number of graduates. I can tell you this, I just got the data from North last year. We're at 87.8% graduation rate, which for an urban school district, sometimes that is a struggle. That's not where we want to be. That's where we don't need to be, but that's where we're at with decreasing chronic absenteeism. I'm sure we can get that number to grow much higher. However, our student achievement as far as testing and so forth, it remains low, and a lot of that is based on the chronic absenteeism. We do have a lot of newcomer students, so they were least likely to be identified for honors or even IEPs. A lot of that is just, and I'll talk about that later, but that's one of the things is we don't have a lot of students in the honors classes or some needing the IEPs. Our honors enrollment has increased. However, we still have disparities in our subgroups. So that was something that really stuck out. And just our level 1 offenses, that's our low level offenses, that over time, they end up turning into students being suspended out of school or getting in school suspension. So those are the big points we found during our data, diving into our data. Some of the things that our team, and I tried to empower the teachers to come up with these ideas, because if things are going to happen with our building, under the new leadership there, we want those teachers to be a big part of it. So actually what I did is at the end of the school year last year, I had the teachers present to the staff the findings and to prepare for next school year the ideas that we want to put in place, so that way they can kind of let that marinate over the summer, get them thinking about next year, this is what we need to do. Take a look at our absenteeism. Some of the things we want to do is the mentoring, even students with their self-monitoring, even student clarity around absenteeism, because a lot of students, they have no idea what chronic absenteeism is. Like, what does it mean? I actually did a little pilot with some students. We did a little goal setting with those kids. It was amazing, just those few students making a change just because they are aware of it and the importance of being in school. And that's just kind of that part of that mentoring piece. We threw in a little PBIS with that as well. I fed them all the time. So we're looking this year. That's what they're looking at doing is getting kids just to be aware of what it means to be chronically absent and monitoring their own attendance. As far as areas of honors enrollment, or even students with not being in IEPs, just not being identified, with our English language learners, we're looking to see the intake process, just about when they come in, seeing kind of where they're at, because the language could be a barrier, but some of these kids are high flyers. I had a new student, he took our state assessments last year and he scored like 5's the highest score, scored 5s on everything. And we're making sure that students do have that ability, and language just there is that language barrier, but we want to make sure those kids are getting opportunities to be in those honors courses. So just identification, even our subgroups, identifying through those students through a battery of different assessments and so forth to say, hey, this kid needs to be in honors. So I think it's just really digging into data, making sure we're really assessing kids to make sure they're where they need to be, identifying kids that should be in honors. And on the other side, students that maybe we don't should have maybe an IEP or be identified as potentially being on an IEP, making sure they get those services. And then the final thing is our level 1 offenses, some of those minor offenses. The team came up with sharing of best practices with classroom management to see how we can do better. Also looked at our new teachers, having some of our veterans who really don't have any problems within the classroom, having them mentor other staff members, just trying to reduce those things that maybe start off very small and escalate. Also taking a look at just even our student handbook and some of the rules that we put in place around tardiness and stuff that over time, those things build up and it could lead to further consequence, which they're suspended. Therefore, that also leads to absenteeism as well. So it's just really putting in things with our teachers to see what they can do up front before it even reaches the administrators. But what can they do in a classroom to try to prevent those things, build those positive relationships, all those things that have been discussed to this point. Now, some of the things I said I want to be practical. Some of those things too is there's a lot going on in schools with just everything. We kind of take care of kids in many different ways, not only academically, but we have to handle a lot of those social emotional things and just whatever comes our way. So one of the challenges I had a team is as we come up with these ideas, just to be mindful that we don't want to add things to everybody's plate. So what are our district priorities? What are our building priorities? And do these things align with what we're currently doing within the building? And really, these things, they do align with our school improvement plan. They do align with our district priorities. So we're going to just try to find one area in each of those areas, or one strategy in each of those areas, and really try to hone in on this year. Talking with the new principal there that's there this year. That's what they're going to do is align some of these things in their school improvement plan. The other thing, we have people from around the country here. I kind of saw as you were logging in. You have to be mindful of the collective bargaining agreement. So I said, because the teachers, they got really excited about this. I said, but you got to remember how this fits with that, and what are we allowed to do based on that collective bargaining agreement. So that's just a real thing. I know sometimes as principal, those things get in my way, but that's the agreement. So we want to make sure that we're being respectful of that, and as we make decisions and work together collaboratively as a school, we want to make sure that we respect that agreement, but yet do what's in the best interest of our scholars. So that's kind of what I have from the reflections from a principal of North High School last year.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thanks for being part of this webinar. We're gonna, I think, move into some questions, Sarah.
Yeah, did you want to kind of wrap up on your next slide? Yep. I think we have time to do that.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure. I've totally lost track of how much time we've used up. So yes, as we move into, like I said, we've done this for 2 years now, we're moving into year 3. And so we're really working this year to start to learn from some of those strategies that we've seen, also learn from more of the literature and research, and start to get clearer on what some of maybe the best bang for your buck strategies might be on some of these. And so we really want to inform that around the evidence. So we're identifying a set of evidence-based policies, practices, and interventions that schools can consider. We don't want to tell schools what to do. The context is different. Their priorities that they come up with are different. The key findings are different, but at least have a sense of, here's some of the top 10 things we think you might be able to move forward. We're finalizing, we're calling it a playbook. It's really a set of materials detailing the approach. So it's how to facilitate this. It's all of our coaching materials and our data visualization tools that will be, I think, finalized this fall, and hopefully we're a federally funded project. So all of our materials go up onto the Institute of Educational Sciences website. So we'll make sure that those are available for you, but please do stay in touch. My information's coming up on the next screen, as well as our newsletter. So we'll make sure we share those. We're moving into 3 new schools, including 2 in Akron. One of those is an alternative school. So we're continuing to learn with our school partners. And part of that learning is that we're studying the implementation of MESA through a usability and feasibility study. We'll be publishing the results from our 3-year usability feasibility study at the end of this year, and then possibly moving into a 4th implementation year with a bigger expansion. We'll see what happens, but that would be coming next year. We can go to the final slides. So this is us. Please get in touch with me. My information is on the slide. If you'd like to learn more about MESA, learn more about what we're doing, share our materials, think about partnering with us in the future. And our information, our partnership information is also on the screen, or you can use the QR code to navigate there and sign up for our newsletter as well. And we'll keep you posted on what we continue to learn.
Thank you so much, Jessie. I think it's really exciting to hear that. And thank you, Frank, for also providing your context around it as a practitioner. We do want to take just a minute to kind of open this up to the audience. Are there any questions that you have for either the school connectedness research or for Jessie and Frank? If you want to drop those in the chat or raise your hand, you can come off mute. And then there's also a question and answer. Yes, so can we go ahead and, Taniko, move it back 1 slide for the contact information? I do want to remind everybody also, you will be getting a copy of these slides that are 508 compliant. So all of those resources on the next 2 slides will be there as well. So I do believe we have 1 question in the question and answer so far, and it was around the 5.4% decrease in chronic absenteeism. And yes, Stella asks if it will be possible to get the recording. Yes, we will include the recording as well as the slides. So Carlos Castillo asked if the 5.4% decline in chronic absenteeism could be attributed specifically to school connectedness strategy, or if it was a reflection of all of the strategies. I do think that was a reflection of all of the strategies that the school implemented. Those schools had really switched their focus from punitive measures to double down on fostering those positive relationships, which would be the school connectedness piece, but also student agency and belonging, which also fall under the category of school connectedness. And then they were also using data to really take strategic actions and plan out their next steps. So it's probably a combination of all of those rather than just a specific single strategy. Any other questions? You can continue to put questions in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and close this out. So Taniko, if we could pick back up at slide 28. Thank you. Yep, that's fine. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we do have one more learning series that's going to come up. It's going to be the end of August 20th, the 27th, and then also September 3rd. And that one's going to be specifically focusing on integrating student, family, and community engagement into state systems. I'm really excited about that. We'll have some great practitioners that are going to be presenting on that. The registration link is in the chat if you are interested in joining us for that opportunity. And we'd also love to hear your feedback. So Tanika, if you could go to the next slide. You can either use this QR code or the link is also in the chat for the evaluation form. We really value your feedback. We always use it, look at it, and try to decide how to best move forward. Again, those continuous improvement cycles we're using as well. So if you could provide us a little bit of feedback, that will help make future sessions even more meaningful for you. Next slide. All right, so we will follow up with an email that will include the session slides and all of the resources. We also want to offer this opportunity. If you are starting your school year, some of this stuff sounded really important that you want to work on one-on-one, please let us know. You can contact us here at the SEACenter at westat.com, and we'll definitely get back to you and think about how we can partner best to support you. Next slide. Here is our contact information once again, along with the QR code. To learn more about our work, you can visit this website, our SEAC website, and that we have some of the resources posted there as well. And just a disclaimer as we wrap up that this webinar is connected by Westat and the American Institutes for Research under contract GS 10F. With the U.S. Department of Education, the contents do not necessarily represent the policy of the Department of Education or endorsements by the federal government, but we appreciate your time today. If you have any other questions, please reach out. We're always happy to talk more about these topics. And with that, we'll give you back 8 minutes of your day.